The essential dilemma is the non-separate existence, that there isn't an I. There's not me and non-duality. There's not subject and object. Non-duality, not two, means there's no this and that. There's just this. Every object, every word, every feeling, every thought is conceptual. So how do we describe or even intuit non-conceptual awareness? And that's that paradoxical dilemma.
Are you ready to question what you believe you know? Dear friend of philosophy, I welcome you to the Key Philosophy Quest. I'm your Doctor of Philosophy, Hellmut Monz, and I invite you to join me on the quest of asking the key questions of philosophy. In this episode of the Key Philosophy Quest, I have philosophical questions for Peter Lawry. Peter is an extraordinary guide from Australia whose life bridges the depths of non-dual inquiry and the transformative frontiers of leadership. Together with his wife, Kalyani, he was so kind as to allow me to visit him in Melbourne. Let's hear what Peter has to say. Your quest is to pay attention until the end and answer the following question. What is non-conceptual awareness? Peter, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, let's jump into it. I saw you speaking on non-duality. Can you tell us what it is?
I can point to it and hint towards it, but I can't tell you what it is. It's, you start with the words non-dual, not two, not even one. And it's pointing to the essential unity, oneness of everything. And like non-duality, the conceptual package is relatively easy to grasp. Yeah. Yet getting to the heart of it is another matter. And the key issue is always this sense of separation. Locating as an I, as subject looking at the object. And that's the dilemma. Because non-duality, not two, means there's no this and that. There's just this.
Oneness, that's confusing. And yeah, like you pointed it out, if I think about oneness, suddenly we have two. In the mix, there's me here, and then there's the oneness I look at, and suddenly we have one, we have two, and then now I bounce back what you said, non-duality. We are supposed to talk about that. It is not two, but I'm somehow left at two. And is that the dilemma?
Look, the essential dilemma is the non-separate existence, that there isn't an I. There's not me and non-duality. There's not subject and object. There's just this. And that can be grasped intellectually, and it's also, and it's known experientially. This is the funny thing. We all know, we all taste this. Something as simple as a really good conversation, where we are really in a heart-to-heart, not a head-to-head, a heart-to-heart. Suddenly there's no me, there's no you, there's no separation, there's just flow. So we all intuit this, we grasp it. Yet this habit of locating as a separate me just keeps tripping us up.
You said there's just this. What is this really?
Well, the word "this" is used advisedly because it's as close to a contentless word as you can get. And it points to the core dilemma that it cannot be expressed. Because like one ancient descriptor is non-conceptual awareness. Now, of course, everything is conceptual. Every object, every word, every feeling, every thought is conceptual. So how do we describe or even intuit non-conceptual awareness? And that's that paradoxical dilemma.
We sit here, I ask about concepts, and suddenly I hear what we're supposed to be talking about is non-conceptual. The word dilemma comes back at me. Then how to work that out? What could we possibly do in order to not fall for concepts because they drag us away from this? How to get to this? What method can I use? What path can I take to get to this?
Look, the non-dual approach is often called the direct path or the pathless path because it's not going anywhere. It's here. So it's a journey without any steps. It's more a settling, a resting, just being here. And of course, that's nothing new because we're always here. It's the habit of locating as a separate thinking machine, the habit of identifying it with our thoughts appears to take us out of here. But of course it doesn't, because we're still here. We're just here thinking.
Yeah, I need to laugh because the pathless path, the way without steps, going the way without steps, stepping without moving the foot, going on a path that is not a path. How?
Well, one of the key things is just accepting that this is paradoxical. And the thing about a paradox is you cannot work it out. If you can work it out, it wasn't a paradox, it was just a thorny problem. Paradoxes aren't worked out. They're not resolved, they're accepted. You know, like, there is no me, yet there seems to be a sense of separation. Resting in the paradox, just resting in this appears differently to how it is. And we all know this, like back to the intimate conversation, that heart to heart. There's no me, there's no you, there's just a flow. Yet there seems to be a separation.
There's talk about appearing, there's talk about seeming. What appears to be true? This appears to be true? Then what is really true?
This. Again, we enter into paradox. It is neither true nor not true. Because any statement which takes a point of view, any position is partial, is incomplete. If you look at, if you start to get close to this inexpressible unicity, you often end up in paradoxical language. You know, there's neither enlightenment nor lack of enlightenment. There's neither a separate I nor a lack of a separate I. We are neither bound nor free. And it's no accident that in all the religious traditions and all the sort of mystical utterances and all the great poets land in this neither nor, both and.
The Netherland.
Yeah.
The nether region.
Neither nor.
Oh, I have two options here. So I heard how to, when you talked about this and you said, I think you said this is what is here. And yeah, we can say then, okay, then it makes sense. It's supposed to be a pathless path, because what path can you take to arrive here or where you already are?
Mm. Yeah.
But then also I hear you keep saying the word a sense of separation. And maybe there's a link. So okay, let's ask this: the pathless path to get to where we are already. And the sense of separation, where they come into play, how does those two dance?
Look, to step back a bit and just look at how life is as a human being. And one of the qualities of this extraordinary intelligence, it spontaneously stores to disk in a multisensory way everything that happens from birth. Every thought, every feeling, every insight, every vision, every experience is stored. And why? Well, a simple answer is survival. A simple example, you have a young girl, say she's 2 years old, talking, but just on that edge of language and understanding. There's a flame, so she's naturally attracted to it, puts her hands in it. As she does that, her mother yells out, "Stop!" So stored to disk is the mother's urgent voice, the sight of the flame, the feeling of heat, the sensation of pain. Half a year later, she's walking down the road with her mother, and she starts to run ahead towards a busy crossroad. Her mother yells out urgently, "Stop!" Spontaneously up comes that word, that urgent sound. So she stops, and her life's saved. So we are all experiencing life as a mixed bag. We're here, we're not here, because everything is spontaneously associating. It's happening in our conversation now. You say something that reminds me of something, etc., etc. That's just how it is. So things are always just simply appearing and disappearing. Now, we know that if you focus on something, you give it life, you give it power. If you try to avoid something, you give it energy, you give it life. If you're trying to ignore it, you give it life, you give it energy. So a subtle hint is to cultivate the habit of just resting as presence. When stuff appears, just, there you go, that's okay, just letting it go. So we neither buy into things, nor reject them, or try to ignore them, just simply acknowledge, let it be. And that starts to cultivate a habit of witnessing. And as we start to rest as witnessing presence, life starts to shift. And we start to actually be more here. So paradoxically, just being with whatever's arising, neither buying into it or rejecting it, just being with it, helps us rest in a deeper space of immediacy.
Which speaks to the pathless path. This is not a path where we walk or move or get anywhere or get anything. This is a path that is one where we try to relax and rest and maybe sink in to who we are. Is this a path of withdrawing?
No, look, that's a common misunderstanding. Because it's just simply being where you are, being with what's arising, neither buying into it or rejecting it. And, when activity is required, it happens. Because in actuality, that's what's going on all the time anyway. Another way of saying it, this is that everything is spontaneous. Everything is always happening spontaneously. So just resting and into the flow, life simply just continues to happen as it always does.
I have a question about freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow I have a question about freedom.
It always comes up.
What is true freedom?
Choiceless awareness. Choices are always being made. Yet there's no choice maker. Because see, there's no separate I. Like there's no control. There's no separate chooser. It just simply happens. Choices just happen. And, like you could do that, you could go totally deterministic, totally do whatever you like, whatever, be totally in control, being free. They're both illusory, because they're partial and they miss. So we're talking about choiceless awareness, which is neither bound nor free. And when, like thoughts are constantly can come up, do this, do that, do this, then suddenly an action happens. In hindsight, we can actually make some sense of it. But then that's only another story.
Talking about stories, can you tell a story about the separate I? What is this story about? That there's an I that is separate in what sense? Of separated from what?
Well, as soon as there's identification, there's a feeling of separation.
From what?
From the totality which is here. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's natural. Like a young child. It's like there's that sense of immediacy of just totally bonded. Then there's a sense of me, not me. And what? People argue about it somewhere around, 1, 2, 3, somewhere in those early stages, a growing sense of separation arises. Me, not me. And nothing wrong with that. Absolutely normal. It's part of human development. It's only when we start to actually believe that it really is me. Because in the end, what is me? Me is a thought. This I is an idea. And it's the ownership of an idea, of a thought. Because the truth of the matter is, they're simply thoughts. They appear and disappear. And, we don't have any control over them. If you did, why would you ever have an unhappy thought? Why would you ever beat yourself up? Why would you ever project negative stuff, future scenarios? If we had control or choice or freedom, we don't. They just arise, appear and disappear. So the beginning of wisdom is just seeing them as they are. They're simply pulsations that are appearing, arising, appearing and disappearing. And left alone, they dissipate like a vapor trail of an airplane, just merges.
I'm still wrapped up with the separate I.
Yeah.
So as a human being, I think I get that I believe that I'm a separate I because there's me here and there's the totality. Or there's anything other. All the rest of the world, the rest of the universe is not me.
So what about when you're in the flow? Where is the I?
When I'm in the flow, as if I work and I'm in the flow, I'm one with the work. Yeah. It's just the work.
Yeah.
There's the single-pointed focus on the work, and that's it.
Yeah. So this I, this precious I, is something that appears and disappears. It's not there all the time.
And I believe that I am not appearing and disappearing. I believe the I is something solid, unchanging. The idea is always is permanent. It's all permanently existing, and that's what I think. And now I'm thinking, where is the I when I go to sleep? Is that? It's supposed to be still there, or is it switched on or switched off? I don't have a memory of what happens. What when I sleep, I dream, but in my dreams I'm there and there, and my dreams also come and go, appearing and disappearing. So I think there's come back into the paradox. I assume the identity to be something stable and solid, yet I fail to back that up because the things I find are not solid. They appear and disappear. Yeah. Thoughts appear, disappear. Yeah. Sensations, feelings, pain, pleasure, emotions. All these are like clouds just passing by.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the paradox. And one of the things that Kalyani and I encourage is to do what we would call a spatial investigation.
Spatial investigation.
When we encourage someone to actually look for the actual physical location of this eye.
I believe it's supposed to be in here, within the body.
Yeah, that's the starting point. And then we encourage people to look and go in and look specifically for it. And that's an interesting exercise. And we encourage people to look for any prompts or hints, good. And of course, we all have our preferences. So some of us feel more, some of us see images more, some of, whatever sense works. So we get people to just look for hints and to look for this eye. And if they find something, some sensation, some feeling, we get them to really, really focus. And focus in a laser-like way. And of course, what happens very quickly is it disappears. And what's left is a sense of spaciousness. That's quite interesting.
Let's stick to the spatial investigation. Spatial investigation is the word. Let's stick to the spatial investigation. They're looking for yourself. And there's one, I assume, like somehow I'm like a camera. So the camera looks, but I'm the operator behind the camera. Mm-hmm. And the question would be to look behind the camera.
Yep.
And there's something about that. So I'm behind the camera and I try to look behind the camera, but I'm rotating the camera to look around at me. And then I believe, well, I'm still there, but I must just now be on the other side of that camera. I just got on the other side.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Then there's another way of thinking that I'm somehow like a stick. So I have a beginning and I extend out to have an end, and somehow the end wants to turn back. So if, for example, my awareness would be like an arrow that shoots out, I look at it at the table, and I know the arrow to bend backwards where the arrow comes from.
Lovely. Yes, with our investigations, you're just describing something quite intuitively, something that we encourage. So first step, and this can be done either with this eye, or it can be done with a feeling, like an unwanted emotion, grief, anger, jealousy, fear, anxiety, whatever. So we use that as a starting point, whether it's an emotional state or this eye, and we encourage people to look.
Are you talking about where the feeling is, or who is perceiving the feeling?
No. We're either looking for the eye or where the location of the feeling, a spatial location. And then we encourage a focusing. And of course, what we're doing is we're encouraging a beam. Okay? So the first stage of this is we get people to look and we get them to really focus with great intensity. So making a very focused beam of awareness. And of course, nothing stands up to investigation. When you really look, it just evaporates. There's nothing there. Then the next step, which follows very closely what you talked about, we encourage people then to look at where they were looking from and really focus on the location of where they're locating. And then we invite them to look at where they're locating from. And we keep going, 4 or 5. And it doesn't take very long to have the experience of awareness clearly distinct from the body. You only have to see your body like the table just once to shake any certainty of this connection with consciousness in this physical body. And that gets very interesting.
So is this I think you said that witness or the observer. So we're trying to observe ourselves, and we can't be. It turns out empty-handed. Things go puff, like those bubbles you blow, and it just bursts. And then the next thing is from where this bubble burst was seen. Who observes that? What we want to observe. So the source of observation, and the failing to locate that, or let's say we would fail to locate that within the body.
Hmm.
Is that the premise, or that's just invitation to check that?
Anyone with a reasonable conceptual understanding of non-duality knows that there's no I that can be, there is no separate I. They know that intellectually.
Yeah.
So this confirms, and this is quite interesting because people often start looking, knowing in their heads that there's nothing to find. And this, we encourage people to keep investigating until there's a certainty arises. And because it's interesting, this awareness, one analogy is it's called space-like. That is, it does not have a center or a circumference or a boundary. That this awareness, this non-conceptual awareness, this space-like awareness, or this sky-like awareness, is essentially unlocatable. And through the two investigations I just talked about, the initial one of looking and then looking at where you're locating from, you actually experience that awareness is unlocatable presence.
As a human, my belief is there is an I within me, and if my body goes one step to the left, the I follows me. The who I am follows me to the left because it's like within this box.
Mm.
And the invitation here is to look, to check that. This is the belief, to check that out if that is true. And maybe even I arrive to the conceptual understanding, we cannot find the I. I have been told there's no I inside the body, and I can repeat the sentence, there's no I in the body. But even that is not satisfying because what you encourage, what I understand, is to actually have the experience to really not take the word for granted or take anyone's word for it, but to really fail at the attempt to locate it yourself.
Yeah, because you have to do your own homework here. This is the key.
In the order of homeworks, is this the only homework? Is this the second homework? Is this the first one? How do you say it in the order of homeworks?
Look, unfortunately, it isn't a map with a sequential step. We start where we are, which is whatever's arising. Yet it's so important to do your own homework, to investigate yourself and to question everything. And one stage, in a sense, is cultivating the habit of witnessing. It's just being less identified with the me story, which is something that happens quite naturally in life as people grow older. The I becomes less brittle. It's not so fragile. When we're quite young, it's like, if you don't like my shoes, you don't like me. We're so identified with the objects that we identify with. And just normal growing awareness and maturity, you see through, hey, I'm not my shoes. I'm not, if people don't like my body, doesn't mean they don't like me. And all that sort of stuff. And so there's a growing, just a relaxing and just being sort of not so fragile, just being just more at ease with how things are. So and similarly, as that sense of I becomes less sort of rigid, also this sense of separation starts to actually disappear, just fade. It becomes, repeated experiences of flow, of just intimacy. This feeling of being at one with is so common. That people just empathy is the start of that. Intuition is a key to it. That what we're talking about is something very normal, very natural.
So I have a feeling, I have a list of questions I try to sneak in here and there.
Yeah.
When I asked, so my question that now comes up is, what is the meaning of being? And I have a feeling you would say you would go to the natural state, what is very normal, this spacious awareness.
Yeah. Look, it's the essence of who we are. You could call it life force, call it presence. And, at times in my life, I had the privilege of being around people dying, lots and lots of it. And it's such a gift, because I think when people are most alive is when they're close to death. And it always struck me that anybody walking into a room to visit a relative or a close friend, they know from the other side of the room whether they're here or not. This very subtle thing of this life force, this presence, they're here. Oh, they've gone. So, the essence of who we are is some sense of presence. You could call it really simply, call it wakefulness.
Wakefulness.
Yeah.
A sense of presence, spaciousness. Yet the things I find, they come and go. You said yourself what appears and disappears. And now I have to follow up on that. Then, what is that which does neither appear nor disappear? Do we have a candidate? Is there an answer to that?
Yes, there is. This wakefulness.
So this spaciousness, or another word for it is also wakefulness, that is always here.
It's like if I asked you to go back 7 years ago before you went to Vietnam, were you here? You could go back. You could actually recall. You could recall in an associated way of the experience and see through your eyes and ears, overhear it and experience it again. And yes, things are different, but you're here. Go back another 10 years. Are you there? Yes. That if you just go through your life backwards, there's that sense of wakefulness, that sense of presence, that here, that knowing, it's always here, even though the content changes.
So let's keep pushing further back. Is this also here before I was born?
Yeah, that's very good place to go. And we encourage people to look there. Who were you one day before you were born? That's really fruitful. I find it so amusing that there's such an obsession with what happens after I die, and hardly anyone looks at what happens before you were.
Because we somehow believe we come from nothing, so we were not alive, and then we started to be alive, and then with that, of course, so we appeared. From non-being, we appeared, and we also will disappear into non-being in death. We think that, right? It's appearing and disappearing. But this does not, this is not true for the wakefulness. This is not true for the spaciousness question. Is the spaciousness so it's that which does neither appear nor disappear, then is it also that which does not come into being, and therefore it will not come out of being?
You're going into some very lovely, delicious, curly places. And the answer is that it cannot be expressed. Because you're talking about, you're asking what non-conceptual awareness is. And that really can't be stated.
If it can't be stated, can it be tasted?
It can be known.
Just comes to my mind, I recently saw an interview with Carl Jung, the founder of depth psychology, and he said in an interview a little bit like this here, and it just rang the bell when you said it can be known. He was asked if he believes in God, and he looked confused, I don't need to believe. I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this what we're trying to get here somehow? We try to see through, cut, I think as you said that, cut through belief in order to find knowledge?
Well, again, the framing is in the old habit of assuming an I looking for an object.
Trying to find something.
Trying to find something.
On a path with steps.
Yeah. And look, there's nothing wrong with that, because that's a habit created through our lifetime, and it's useful for ordinary things, like to get out of this room, we need to locate subject, find the door object. Absolutely fine. Yet for this work, it's insufficient. But if we go back to something you mentioned earlier, if we look at the analogies around dreaming, because in dreaming, there's it seems very real.
It seems real.
And then there's a waking. And in the waking, there's a knowing that you were dreaming.
Yeah, as a philosopher, again, alarm bells run up. Maybe you have, maybe you experience this yourself. I had that when you wake up, but you wake up inside a dream, and you wake up in a dream, and there are layers and nested dreams within dreams. Yeah. I once dreamed that I kind of got trapped in dreams, and I woke up felt like hundreds and thousands of times. But the problem, every time I woke up, it was still another dream. Yeah. So I'm now very distrustful when you call about wakefulness. If I wake up, what if this awakening is again another dream, another belief? Yeah. How then do I know that this is not outside? This is not a dream.
Kalyani and I did about 4 or 5 years of Jungian dream analysis, because we were training to be a Jungian therapist at one point. Yeah. So we studied dreams very, very deeply, and we were recording our dreams. And so we'd wake, and so we got into the habit of waking in the night and writing them down. And it got to the point where the dream life became more real than the waking life, because we were just so focused, because we were seeing our therapist once every few weeks, and we would be capturing dreams. And in the process of that, started to actually learn our own dream language, because because the dream language is different, because it's very pictorial. It's not thought based. It's visual.
Yeah.
And so, in the understanding the dream language, started to actually go into the depths of the being, and then started to actually be awake and asleep. And that gets quite interesting, that learning to actually be awake while asleep.
Lucid dreaming.
Yeah. And that's, it's once learned, you don't unlearn it, And so there's a clarity that comes through that, Or another very simple thing, which is common, like to everyone. You are fast asleep, deeply asleep, beyond dreaming, just deeply asleep. And there's an emergency and someone calls your name urgently. You wake up. Something is awake. In the depth of sleep, there's some presence, something innate. The life force itself is there. Still registering, using through the senses, experiencing in a very subtle way, so that in danger, crisis, or an urgent calling of your name even, will bring you back into waking consciousness.
I'm still, shaky, afraid, and distrustful, being maybe a victim of a prank, a dream prank. You studied dreams, so then help me understand, how can we tell this is not a dream and this is actually real? Can we study really, really close to the dream and I see. There's a giveaway for a dream, and so we can be rest assured, this is actually real.
Well, I'm sure you know that story of that I think it was a Chinese master who said, am
Butterfly.
I a butterfly dreaming that I'm a human being, or a human being dreaming I'm a butterfly?
Exactly. How to ease that? How to get an answer?
See, and this here, this is a waking dream, and you wake from this dream, and it's
Yeah, but the waking from that dream. What if that is another dream?
That's again another speculation.
Yes.
Yeah.
How can we put speculation to bed? How can we put them to sleep?
In a sense, knowledge is not transferable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like this distinction between thinking and knowing can be very, very helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I know, I think I don't know.
Yeah.
But problem again, distrustfulness.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just what I think I know, and maybe it's not what I really know.
Yeah. And again, back to some basics, like is it daytime right now?
Yeah, I assume, I believe so. I think so.
We know.
Yeah.
Because our senses tell us it's daytime. Mm-hmm. We don't have to think about it. Mm-hmm. We know. Or one that everyone experiences, that you meet someone and you know that you know them, but you don't know where you know them from. Then the thinking kicks in. Was this the sister of that friend I used to know 20 years ago? Is this da-da-da-da-da-da? So the thinking tries to fill in, but the knowing is instantaneous. Knowing just breaks through.
The dream, I'm still wrapped up in the dreams. Who are you really?
Well, this body has a name and labels and a story. Yet what I am is what you are. That life. That's an aspect of life expressing itself. Yeah. And that, I think, is the wonder of this life is that there are so many billions of human beings and each one is unique. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like every fingerprint is unique. Every iris pattern is unique. And we have billions of bacteria. And a percentage of those are unique to each individual. And I think this is the wonder that every human being is a unique manifestation of the life force, and nothing is ever repeated. And I think that's something so precious and so exquisite. That what we are is life itself. And it is unique and not special. And I think, the old analogy of the wave in the ocean, the wave every wave is unique. It is born, it rises, it forms, and is subtly different from every other wave. Yet it never ceases to be the ocean.
Back to the beginning, the paradox, we seem to be many, yet somehow we also are one. We are different waves without repetition at all appearing and disappearing, yet also at the same time we all are one.
Yeah. And, it's like, to realize this, in a way, there are a number of classical windows. And one window is to just say yes. Just profoundly accept and open up to everything that happens without qualification. Now that will create all sorts of drama and upset and craziness, but it will also create extraordinary understanding very quickly, because saying yes breaks away separations. And of course, the absolute opposite. The second window is to say no to everything. Within Advaita Vedanta, it's neti, not this, not this, not this. Or you take St. John of the Cross, 16th century Spanish mystic, nada, 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 Latin for nothing, nothing, nothing. negation, negation, negation. No, this isn't it. Not this, not this, not this. That will take you there. That will take you home. Particularly useful if there's any sense of hubris or attainment, which immediately invites the realm of paradox. Because acknowledging, saying yes to everything, denying, saying no to everything, totally opposite. You can't get more distinct than yes and no, yet they both will take you to the same place. Paradox. You can't work that out. And then the fourth window, which is perhaps the most subtle of all, so exquisite, which we touched on in the beginning, neither nor. Yeah, we're neither bound nor free. We're neither here nor there. We're neither enlightened or unenlightened. Now, there's four classical windows. You could call them paths. And they all end up at the same place without going anywhere. Because they're just simply engaging with what's arising. So there's no stepping. There's just simply holding a way of seeing.
The practice of being.
Yeah, just being. Just simply being.
What can I do in order to be?
Nothing. Really hard. Nothing. Really do nothing. Yeah, it's like how do you practice spontaneity? Yeah. It's just, I think perhaps one of the most useful words is relax. Just be with, there's a beautiful word, it's found in a number of some 19th century hymns. The English word is abide. And abide means to just rest, nestle, snuggle into. And just embracing, engaging where we are. Because I think one of the things is that this intelligence that we are is intelligent. And it is spontaneously taking us where we need to be and opening us and drawing to us whatever is necessary. Even if we don't understand it, it's this extraordinary intelligence that we are is so powerful. Another descriptor is called self-shining, that it needs no external light. It simply just illuminates. And I just wish more people could realize the power of their own thought, their own focus. You spoke earlier about you pay attention to something. The power of our attention is so extraordinary. And, when we abuse it, put it into being jealous or resentful or bitter or angry, there's just such destructive power. Whereas it can be just simply just seeing the beauty, the wonder that's simply here. And just being with things as they are.
Just being with things as they are. As a practice of being. Which is not a path that takes a lot of work. It's not a hard path.
Yet it takes nothing, because it gives everything. One hint back to these five senses, and one practice we often encourage is we encourage someone to start to look through their eyes as if the eyes are a camera, because a camera doesn't judge or discriminate. It simply just sees things equally without focusing or fixating on this or that, and just seeing everything at once as clearly as you can. Then simultaneously letting the ears be like a microphone. And microphones don't judge or discriminate or have preferences. They simply hear what is. And then we encourage people to actually hold the seeing completely and they hear it completely. And then, of course, we just run through the five senses, smelling everything just as it is. Then tasting the taste, if only the taste in your own mouth, inside your own being. And then feeling sensations. And we encourage people to hold all five simultaneously, equally balanced, which of course is a logical impossibility. Yet in the attempting to do it, the fixation on thinking falls away, and people experience a thought-free state. Of course, the joke is the eyes are always seeing completely, and the ears are always hearing completely. The nose is always smelling completely, and so is the taste, and so the feeling sensations. Yet we tend not to notice those things because of the habit of being caught up in the me story. Yesterday and tomorrow, regrets or projections. So just coming back into the senses and attempting to hold the five equally balanced as a sort of a spontaneous activity, that starts to cultivate a habit of just being here in the sensory experience, in the immediacy, rather than in the future projections or in the memory reruns, And if the thinking machinery gets caught up in something, as soon as you notice it, just, there you go. Just letting it, acknowledging it, letting it be, that it just falls away.
The practice of being without judgment, like the microphone, like the camera, just to be with what is and to let it be. Okay, then let's let it be. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Hellmut.
Dear friend of philosophy, thank you for joining the Key Philosophy Quest. So tell me, what is non-conceptual awareness? Write your answer into the comments below. If you want more, keyphilosophy.com and sign up to the Key Philosophy newsletter.